Now let us begin by being still for a moment, not because stillness itself accomplishes anything, but because the stillness reveals that which already is. We are not entering into silence as a method, nor are we practicing quietude as a discipline. We are simply ceasing from our own activity long enough to discover that God has never ceased from his. Be still and know that I am God. That is not an instruction to do something. It is a revelation of what happens when doing stops. Most of us have been taught to come to spiritual work with an objective. We sit down to pray for a healing, or for relief, or for peace, or for supply. We come with something in mind that we want changed, and almost imperceptibly, that places us in the position of the doer, the fixer, the improver. Yet the Master said plainly, I can of mine own self do nothing. And if that was true of him, how much more must it be true of us? So we are not beginning this hour with an attempt to let go of anything. We are not here to release anger, to fix fear, to dissolve resentment, or even to improve ourselves spiritually. Those are all activities of the personal sense, and the personal sense cannot heal itself, reform itself, or liberate itself. The personal sense can only exhaust itself. What we are doing now is far simpler and far more radical. We are withdrawing from effort. We are stepping out of the belief that something must be done by us in order for God to appear. We are yielding just a little to the truth that God is already present, already governing, already revealing himself as harmony. Thy presence is fullness of joy. Not will be fullness of joy is, you see, the difficulty in spiritual work is not that God is absent. The difficulty is that thought is crowded with plans, crowded with memories, crowded with reactions, crowded with images of what should be different. And so the first movement of this work is always the same, a gentle emptying. Not an emptying that you perform, but an emptying that happens when you stop clinging. Do not struggle to become quiet. That is only another form of effort. Simply notice that you are not required to carry the weight of the world at this moment. You are not required to solve your life. You are not required to fix anyone else. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. Not because you are weak, but because he is God. Now, if thoughts arise, do not condemn them. Condemnation only strengthens the sense of separation. If thoughts arise, let them pass as clouds pass across the sky. You are not the cloud, and you are not even the sky. You are that awareness in which the sky itself appears. And even that awareness is not personal. It is the activity of the Father within. We are not here to analyze truth. We are here to feel our way into it. For truth realized is not a thought. It is a state of consciousness. And that state cannot be reached by striving. It is entered only by surrender. Jesus did not say, think your way into the kingdom of God. He said, the kingdom of God is within you. Within you, not at the end of effort, not at the end of years of study, not at the end of purification. Within you now. And the only thing that obscures it is the belief that you must first become something else. So let us rest from becoming. Let us rest from improving. Let us rest even from trying to let go. For it is not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. In this stillness, something very subtle begins to happen. The personal sense loosens its grip. The mind stops reaching outward. The will stops pushing. And in that gentle cessation, there is often a quiet sense, not dramatic, not emotional, but unmistakable, a sense of presence, a sense of rightness, a sense that all is, in fact, well. That sense is not your peace. Jesus was careful to say, "My peace I give unto you," and his peace is not the peace of circumstances, nor the peace of solved problems. It is the peace that comes from knowing without words that there is one power, one life, one presence, and that this presence is not opposed. Remain here for a moment, not watching for results, not waiting for feelings, simply consenting. Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. And remember, the hearing is not with the ears, but with the heart that has ceased arguing. Nothing is being asked of you now. Nothing is being demanded. The government is not on your shoulders. It never was. The Christ is not waiting for you to become worthy. The Christ is revealing itself as your very being. And so we begin not with effort, not with technique, not with instruction, but with this holy pause, this yielding, this quiet recognition that God is, and that God is sufficient. Now, having entered this stillness, it becomes necessary, very necessary, to correct a misconception that quietly follows many sincere seekers onto the spiritual path. And this correction is not given to discourage you, but to free you. It is not given to take something away from you, but to remove a burden you were never meant to carry. Letting go is not a method. It is not a technique. It is not a psychological exercise. It is not a mental process by which you persuade yourself to feel differently. And above all, it is not something you do. That statement alone may come as a shock because the human mind is always searching for a way, some steps to follow, some inner maneuver, some formula that, if properly applied, will bring peace. But every formula belongs to the realm of personal effort. And personal effort, no matter how sincere, cannot transcend the personal sense. Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. If letting go required effort, then effort would be power. If letting go required technique, then technique would be law. And yet the Master revealed plainly that there is but one power, and that power is God. Anything that claims authority apart from that is idolatry, even when it wears spiritual clothing. Now observe this very carefully. When people say, "I am trying to let go," what they usually mean is, "I am struggling with something that I believe has power over me." And the struggle itself is the evidence of the belief. You never struggle with that which you know has no power. You do not struggle to let go of last year's newspaper. You do not struggle to release a dream you had last night. Why? Because you do not believe they govern your life. And so it is not the emotion, the memory, or the condition that binds you. It is the belief that it possesses authority. Here, then, is the correction. Letting go is not an act of will. It is the withdrawal of belief. Jesus never taught his students how to wrestle sin into submission. He never instructed them to battle disease, conquer fear, or overcome evil. He simply refused to grant reality to any power apart from God. "Who did sin?" he asked. "I find no fault in him. The maid is not dead, but sleepeth. Pick up thy bed and walk." Always the same consciousness, no acknowledgement of opposing power. And this is why mental and emotional techniques eventually exhaust people. They keep the false assumption intact that something is real, powerful, and dangerous, and that you must manage it. But Christ consciousness begins with the opposite premise. that God is the only power, and therefore nothing else requires management. Now understand this clearly. We are not denying that emotions appear. We are not pretending that thoughts do not arise. We are not claiming that human situations do not present themselves. But we are making a far more radical declaration. We are saying they do not govern. There is no power in heaven or on earth or beneath the earth but God. And once this is even faintly accepted, not argued, not analyzed, but accepted, something begins to loosen. The grip of fear softens, the urgency to fix dissolves, the compulsion to react diminishes. Not because you have mastered yourself, but because the false self is no longer enthroned. This is why all true spiritual release feels effortless. It is not dramatic. It is not forceful. It often comes quietly, like realizing you were holding your breath and have finally exhaled. You do not say, I have let go. You discover that there is nothing left to hold. Now let us take this one step deeper. Many sincere people say, if I do not actively let go, won't I remain stuck? And the answer is, you remain stuck only as long as you believe you are the one who must move yourself. But when you yield even slightly to the truth that God is the mover, the healer, the redeemer, the burden lifts from your shoulders. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Stand still, not mentally frozen, but inwardly surrendered, and see what happens when you stop interfering with grace. See what happens when you stop assigning power to your reactions, your history, your conditioning, your wounds. This is why the master could sleep in the storm. This is why he could face accusation without defense. This is why he could forgive without effort. He was not practicing a method. He was living in the realization that there is nothing to practice against. So as we move forward in this work, remember this correction and return to it again and again. The moment you feel strain, you have slipped back into personal effort. The moment you feel pressure, you have accepted a second power. And the moment you notice that, without condemnation, you can gently return to stillness and say, Father, thou hast never relinquished government. And in that acknowledgement, the letting go is already accomplished. Now that this correction has been made, that letting go is not a method, it becomes necessary to place words, teachings, and techniques exactly where they belong. Not to discard them, not to condemn them, but to restore them to their rightful function. For when anything is given a place it does not belong, it becomes a burden instead of a blessing. Words are not healers. Statements of truth are not healers. Techniques are not healers. They never have been, and they never will be. The healing work, the transforming work, the redeeming work is accomplished by realization. And realization is not produced by words, it is revealed through them when consciousness is ready. This is why Jesus did not repeat formulas. This is why he did not instruct his disciples in incantations. This is why he did not say, when sickness appears, say these words. Instead, he lived in a state of awareness so aligned with the Father that words arose naturally, effortlessly, and appropriately in the moment. The words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself. Now, observe something very important. When a statement of truth is used to do something, it becomes a tool of the personal sense. But when a statement of truth is used to steady consciousness, it becomes a doorway. The same words, but a different function. If I say, God is the only power, and I say it to overcome fear, then I have already accepted fear as power. If I say it to fix a condition, then I have already believed the condition governs my life. But if I say it quietly, gently, simply to remind myself of what is true, then it lifts consciousness above the battlefield altogether. And from that lifted place, the battle disappears. This is why affirmations often fail, not because the words are untrue, but because they are misused. They are asked to accomplish what only realization can do, and realization cannot be forced. It arrives when resistance ceases. Except ye become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. A child does not repeat words to make the sun rise. A child does not argue with gravity. A child rests in what is, and so the kingdom opens not to the clever, not to the disciplined, not to the advanced, but to the receptive. Now, do not misunderstand this. There is a place for study. There is a place for listening. There is a place for hearing truth spoken again and again. But their value lies in this. They lift you out of the hypnotism of appearances. They remind you temporarily of what you already know eternally. Words are scaffolding. They are not the building. And when the building stands, the scaffolding falls away of its own accord. How often have you noticed that the moment you truly feel peace, the words stop, the arguments stop, the affirmations stop. The mental activity ceases not because you have commanded it to cease, but because there is nothing left to say. When I am weak, then am I strong. Weak, not in the human sense, but weak in personal effort, weak in self-direction, weak in the belief that I must do something, and strong in the quiet assurance that God has never stopped doing everything. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight. The most powerful moment in spiritual work is the moment you stop working spiritually, when you stop trying to let go, when you stop trying to forgive, when you stop trying to heal, and simply allow yourself to be held in the awareness of presence. Now let us bring this directly into our theme. Many people say, I've tried letting go, but it doesn't last. And the reason is simple. They tried. They applied effort to something that requires surrender. They used words as levers instead of as lamps. Let words illuminate, not manipulate. Let scripture awaken, not coerce. Let truth be recognized, not wielded. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Not use the truth, not apply the truth. Know it. And knowing in this sense is not intellectual agreement, it is a felt recognition, a quiet yes within. So as we move forward, you may hear words repeated, you may hear ideas restated. Do not try to do anything with them. Let them do what they are meant to do. Lift, soften, clarify, and then disappear. When words have fulfilled their purpose, silence takes over. And silence is not empty. Silence is full. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. And in that quiet confidence, the letting go you have been seeking is no longer something you pursue. It is something you discover has already occurred. Now we are ready, truly ready to define what letting go means. Not as the world uses the phrase, but as it is understood in spiritual consciousness. For until this is clearly seen, the seeker will continue to confuse surrender with effort and release with struggle. Letting go, in its true sense, is not the act of pushing something away. It is not the act of forgetting. It is not the act of suppressing emotion or silencing thought. all of these still assume that the thing being addressed is real, powerful, and entitled to your attention. Letting go is the abandonment of judgment. That is the heart of it. Judgment is the hidden glue that binds us to experience. Judgment gives meaning to appearances. Judgment assigns power. Judgment says, this should not be happening, or this must be fixed, or this defines me. And the moment judgment is present, the personal sense is active. Judge not, that ye be not judged. This was not a moral instruction. It was a metaphysical revelation. For to judge is to divide the world into forces, to believe in good and evil, right and wrong, health and disease, success and failure, peace and disturbance. And once divided, these opposites must wrestle. The human mind then spends its days choosing sides, defending positions, and managing outcomes. But Christ consciousness stands apart from this divided world. It does not take sides because it sees only one life, one power, one presence, and therefore it judges nothing because there is nothing outside God to judge. When you let go spiritually, you are not releasing a memory, you are releasing the judgment that memory has power. You are not dissolving fear, you are relinquishing the belief that fear has authority. You are not forgiving a person, you are surrendering the belief that a person has the capacity to separate you from God. Neither do I condemn thee. That was not sympathy. That was not kindness in the human sense. That was vision. It was the seeing of reality untouched by appearances. And in that seeing, the appearance lost its claim. Now let us look honestly. Most of what people call holding on is not emotional attachment. It is judgment attachment. They are not clinging to the event. They are clinging to the conclusion drawn from the event. They are not holding the pain. They are holding the meaning. And so long as meaning is assigned, the mind will not rest. Letting go, then, is the quiet inward consent. I will no longer interpret this through the lens of separation. I will no longer tell myself a story about power apart from God. I will no longer keep score, rehearse, blame, or justify reaction. This is why forgiveness and letting go are one and the same in spiritual truth. Forgiveness is not an act toward another, it is the release of judgment within oneself. It is the end of interpretation. Love thinketh no evil. Notice, it does not say love overcomes evil. It says love does not think it. Where love is, evil is not named, and what is not named cannot rule. Now, do not misunderstand this. Letting go does not mean you approve of human behavior. It does not mean you invite harm. It does not mean you remain in situations that violate wisdom. It simply means you are no longer governed by reaction. You may act, but you do not react. You may move, but you are not driven. You may speak, but you do not strike. The difference is consciousness. When judgment is gone, reaction has nothing to stand on. This is why Christ consciousness is always described as peace, not because circumstances are perfect, but because there is no longer an inner tribunal arguing the case. Great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. Nothing shall offend them, not because they are numb, but because offense requires judgment, and judgment has been relinquished. So when we speak of letting go, we are speaking of this inner release from the role of judge, judge of others, judge of conditions, judge of yourself, and especially judge of God's universe. For the greatest judgment of all is the belief that God's creation is flawed and must be corrected by human effort. Once this is seen, even faintly, you will notice something extraordinary. The urge to let go disappears. The pressure lifts, the struggle ends, and what remains is a quiet willingness to see as God sees. And in that seeing, there is nothing left to hold. Now we come to a point where many sincere seekers unknowingly turn aside from the narrow path, not because they are careless, but because they are earnest. They hear of release. They feel the weight of emotion, and naturally, they assume that the work must be to do something with the emotion, to process it, express it, analyze it, discharge it, or dissolve it. And yet, emotional release and spiritual release are not the same thing. Emotional release belongs to the human realm. Spiritual release belongs to consciousness. Emotional release seeks relief. Spiritual release reveals freedom. Emotional release may bring temporary ease. Spiritual release removes the foundation upon which disturbance rests. Now let us be very clear and very gentle here. There is nothing wrong with emotional honesty. There is nothing sinful about feeling anger, fear, grief, or resentment. These are not moral failures. They are simply evidence of belief in separation, belief in power apart from God, belief in a self that can be wounded. But the danger arises when we begin to believe that emotion itself is the cause rather than the symptom. When a person says, "If only I could release this anger, I would be free," they are mistaking the smoke for the fire. The anger is not the bondage. The belief that gave birth to it is the bondage. And until that belief is seen through, emotion will reappear in new forms, attached to new objects, rehearsing the same pattern again and again. Jesus never addressed emotion directly. He addressed consciousness. He did not say to the storm, "Calm down gradually." He said, "Peace, be still." And the storm obeyed not because it was emotionally processed, but because its supposed power was never acknowledged. Spiritual release does not work on emotion. It renders emotion unnecessary. This is why Christ consciousness does not attempt to feel better. It rests in what is true. And when truth is realized, feeling follows naturally. But when feeling is pursued, truth is delayed. Now, observe this carefully in your own experience. When you attempt to release emotion by effort, by talking it out endlessly, by mentally wrestling with it, by trying to move through it, you may feel momentary relief. But the pattern returns because the belief remains untouched. The belief says, "This emotion has something to tell me." The belief says, "This emotion must be dealt with." The belief says, "This emotion has power over my peace." And that belief is the idol. "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." An emotion becomes a god the moment you grant it authority over your state of being. A memory becomes a god the moment you consult it for identity. A trauma becomes a god the moment you allow it to dictate your present. Spiritual release is the quiet refusal to worship these gods. Now, do not confuse this with repression. Repression pushes something down while still believing in its power. Spiritual release lifts consciousness above the level where the emotion can operate. It does not suppress. It transcends. Paul put it simply, "Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth." He did not say, "Fix the earth." He said, "Rise above it." This rising is not physical, and it is not emotional. It is a shift in awareness, a shift from the belief in two powers to the realization of one. a shift from personal interpretation to divine perception. And when this shift occurs, even briefly, you will notice that the emotion loses its grip without being touched. You did not argue with it. You did not fight it. You did not analyze it. You simply stopped believing it had authority. That is spiritual release. This is why Christ consciousness can forgive instantly, not because it is compassionate in the human sense, but because it never accepted the offense as real in the first place. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That was not said from emotional healing. That was said from spiritual sight. Now let this settle deeply. If you attempt to use spiritual truth to manage emotion, you will fail. But if you allow spiritual truth to govern consciousness, emotion will fall away of its own accord. So, when feelings arise, and they do not ask, how do I get rid of this? Ask instead, what power have I just granted? And then gently, without condemnation, withdraw that power. Say inwardly, not as a formula, but as a recognition, this has no law. This has no authority. This has no source in God. And then rest. Rest not waiting for the emotion to leave, but resting in the truth that it was never Lord over your life. That rest is the doorway. That rest is the release. That rest is where the personal sense loosens its hold and the Christ within resumes its rightful government. Now we come to something that is seldom recognized, and yet it lies at the root of nearly every struggle on the spiritual path. It is subtle, it is respectable, it often disguises itself as sincerity, and because of that, it is rarely questioned. Yet, until it is seen, letting go remains difficult, and freedom seems delayed. That hidden idol is this: the belief that something in your experience has power. Not power in theory, but power in fact. Power to disturb you, power to define you, power to obstruct your good, power to delay God. This idol does not always appear as fear. Sometimes it appears as concern, sometimes as responsibility, sometimes as compassion, sometimes even as humility. But wherever you find yourself preoccupied, wherever thought returns again and again, there you will find an idol asking for recognition. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now notice this. People rarely worship what they hate. They worship what they fear, what they protect, what they fix, what they manage. The thing you cannot stop thinking about is the thing you have silently crowned. One person crowns the body, another crowns money, another crowns relationship, another crowns memory, another crowns trauma, another crowns time, another crowns personality, either their own or another's. But the form does not matter. The error is the same. It is always the belief in a second power. And the moment you believe in a second power, letting go becomes impossible, because you are asking yourself to release something you believe governs your life. That would be like asking a person to stop believing in gravity while stepping off a cliff. The mind will not do it. It cannot do it. Fear will not allow it. This is why so many people say, I know God is all-powerful, and whatever follows that but is the idol. But my anxiety feels real. But my past still affects me. But this person hurt me deeply. But this condition is serious. But this situation is complicated. Every but introduces a rival power. Yet the revelation of Christ is uncompromising on this point. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. not the greatest power, not the strongest power, the only power. And this is not poetry. This is law. Now, do not think for a moment that this teaching is harsh. It is the most merciful teaching ever given. Because as long as you believe something has power over you, you must either fight it or submit to it. And both are forms of bondage. But when you see even faintly that there is no power apart from God, the burden drops. You are no longer required to defeat the idol because you no longer believe it exists. Jesus did not resist evil. He did not negotiate with it. He did not reform it. He did not study it. He simply did not grant it reality. And in that refusal, evil had nothing to stand on. Resist not evil. Why? Because resistance admits reality. This is why most letting go practices secretly fail. They begin by naming the idol, examining the idol, feeling the idol, tracing the idol's history, and then trying to dismiss it. But by then, the idol has already been enthroned. Spiritual release begins earlier than that. It begins at the level of assumption. What am I assuming has power here? Is it a person? Is it a condition? Is it an emotion? Is it a future? Is it a past? And the moment that question is honestly asked, not to fix, not to analyze, but to see light begins to break through, because truth does not need to argue. Truth only needs to be recognized. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. If this is true, and it is, then nothing has origin, law, or authority apart from God. And that includes your fear. That includes your resentment. That includes your story. That includes your struggle to let go. Now, listen carefully. You are not being asked to deny your experience. You are being invited to deny its claim to power. There is a vast difference. The moment you stop believing that the idol governs your peace, you will notice something astonishing. The urge to let go vanishes because there is nothing left to release. You are not dropping something heavy. You are realizing you were never holding it. This is why true freedom never feels dramatic. It feels simple, quiet, almost anticlimactic. You wonder why you struggled so long, and you realize it was never the thing itself, it was the belief about the thing. So as we move forward, remember this. Do not ask yourself how to let go. Ask instead, where have I granted power? And then gently, without self-condemnation, without effort, withdraw that consent. In that withdrawal, the idol dissolves. And where the idol stood, God is revealed. Now we come to the first great pillar upon which all spiritual release rests. Without this, the teaching of one power cannot be lived. Without this, impersonalization cannot occur. Without this, letting go remains an idea instead of a state of being. That pillar is divine love. And immediately we must remove a misunderstanding. Divine love is not human affection. It is not liking people. It is not approving behavior. It is not warmth of feeling, nor is it emotional tenderness. Divine love is not something you generate. It is something you recognize. Divine love is the capacity to see without judgment. Judge not after the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. And righteous judgment, in this sense, is no judgment at all. The human mind is trained to evaluate everything it sees, good or bad, right or wrong, deserving or undeserving, safe or dangerous. And this habit of judgment feels so natural that we rarely question it. Yet judgment is the very mechanism by which separation is maintained. The moment you judge, you divide. The moment you divide, you create opposing forces. And the moment you create opposing forces, you must choose sides. Christ consciousness does not choose sides. It stands above the battlefield. Now, let us be very honest. Most people do not struggle to let go because they are holding on to pain. They struggle because they are holding on to judgment. Judgment of others. Judgment of situations. Judgment of themselves. Judgment of how life should have unfolded. And judgment always carries a sentence. This person wronged me. This should not have happened. I should be further along. I failed. They failed. Each of these is a verdict, and every verdict demands enforcement. So long as judgment remains, the mind will continue to replay the case, seeking justice, vindication, or closure. And peace will remain out of reach, not because God withholds it, but because judgment blocks awareness of it. Jesus revealed a different way. To the sinner, he said, "Neither do I condemn thee." To the accusers, he said nothing. To the law, he bowed to no authority but God. This was not moral leniency. It was spiritual vision. He did not see a sinner trying to become holy. He saw holiness appearing as man. He did not see a human being in need of reform. He saw the Christ temporarily obscured by belief. And this seeing is divine love. Divine love does not fix people. Divine love does not improve people. Divine love does not analyze people. Divine love beholds. To as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, not by effort, not by correction, but by reception. Now, this must be applied inwardly as well. Many people who speak of letting go are harsh judges of themselves. They condemn their progress. They measure their spirituality. They criticize their reactions. And all the while, they wonder why peace eludes them. But self-judgment is still judgment, and judgment, no matter its target, keeps the personal sense alive. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. If you judge yourself as limited, struggling, failing, you will experience limitation, struggle, and failure, not as punishment, but as law, the law of divided consciousness. Divine love begins the moment you stop holding anyone, including yourself, on trial. This does not mean you ignore wisdom. It does not mean you deny growth. It means you withdraw condemnation. It means you cease assigning moral or spiritual weight to appearances. You may still act. You may still choose. You may still walk away from what is harmful, but you do so without hatred, without resentment, without inner argument. You do so from peace, not reaction. That is divine love in action. Now, here is the miracle of this first pillar. The moment judgment ceases, power disappears from appearances. Offense loses its sting. Memory loosens its grip. Fear softens. The compulsion to let go fades because nothing is pressing against you anymore. This is why forgiveness is not something you do. It is something that happens when judgment ends. Love covers a multitude of sins, not by hiding them, but by refusing to see them as reality. And so as we proceed, remember this. Every time you feel stuck, ask not, what must I release? But rather, where am I still judging? And then, gently, without effort, let that judgment fall away, not by force, but by vision. For when divine love is present, nothing remains to be released. Now we must turn this light inward, because for many on the spiritual path, the most persistent form of judgment is not directed at others, it is directed at oneself. And until this is uncovered and gently dissolved, the sense of struggle will continue, no matter how much truth is studied or spoken. Self-condemnation is not humility. Self-criticism is not honesty. Self-judgment is not spiritual discernment. They are all subtle ways of keeping the personal sense alive. When a person says, I should be further along, or I know better than this, or why do I still react this way? They believe they are being sincere, even responsible. But what they are actually doing is holding the human sense of self on trial, measuring it, correcting it, disciplining it, as though that self were the author of spiritual life. Yet the revelation of Christ says something very different. I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. If this is true, and it is, then who exactly is being condemned? Who is failing? Who is lagging behind? Who is being judged as insufficient? Self-condemnation rests on the assumption that you are the doer of your spiritual unfolding, and that assumption is the root of frustration. Now listen carefully. The Christ does not evolve. The Christ does not improve. The Christ does not stumble, fall back, or lose progress. The Christ is, and your only difficulty arises when you identify with something other than that. This is why judging yourself never produces freedom. It strengthens the very sense of I that must eventually fade. The personal self feeds on attention, whether praise or blame, and self-condemnation is still attention. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. Fear includes the fear that you are not enough, not ready, not doing it right, and that fear is never of God. Now observe how gently Jesus dealt with his own disciples. They misunderstood him repeatedly. They slept when he asked them to watch. They fled when he was arrested. They doubted after the resurrection, and never once did he condemn them. He corrected, he instructed, he revealed, but he did not shame. Peace be unto you was always his return. That same Christ speaks within you now. And when you condemn yourself, you are not agreeing with God, you are arguing with him. Self-condemnation says, I am separate from grace. Grace says, my strength is made perfect in weakness. And weakness here does not mean moral failure. It means the yielding of personal control. It means the recognition that spiritual life is not sustained by effort, but by surrender. Now, here is a vital truth. Every time you judge yourself, you delay realization, not because God withdraws, but because attention is pulled back into the personal sense, and the personal sense cannot know God. Therefore, the most compassionate act you can perform for yourself is to stop monitoring your spiritual state, stop grading your progress, stop measuring your peace, stop asking whether you are doing it right. These questions never come from the Christ. They come from the personal sense seeking relevance. Jesus said, take no thought for your life, and that includes spiritual life. Your work is not to manage your unfoldment. Your work is to stop resisting it. The unfoldment is already underway, already governed, already complete in principle. He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it. You are not required to push yourself forward. You are invited to relax backward, back into the truth of your being. Now let divine love do its inward work. The same love that refuses to judge others must refuse to judge you. The same vision that beholds Christ in your brother must behold Christ in yourself, not as an aspiration, but as a fact. Say quietly within, not as a declaration, but as a recognition. God is my selfhood, and let that settle. If God is your selfhood, then who is there to condemn? Who is there to improve? Who is there to be disappointed? And in that recognition, something loosens. The inner pressure lifts. The compulsion to fix yourself fades. And you discover that peace does not come from being better, but from being absent. Absent from self-judgment. Absent from self-management. Absent from self-importance. And in that absence, the Christ appears not dramatically, not emotionally, but naturally, as ease, as kindness, as patience, as a deepening quiet that no longer needs to be defended. This, too, is letting go. Now we come to the second great pillar of Christ consciousness, and this one, more than any other, separates spiritual living from religious effort. For until this is realized, not merely believed, but inwardly known, there will always be struggle, defense, and fear hiding beneath our prayers. That pillar is the realization that there is but one power, not two, not God and something else, not spirit and matter, not good wrestling with evil. One Lord, one faith, one baptism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. These are not poetic phrases, they are revelations, and yet they remain the least accepted truth in all of religion. For most people, even sincere, devoted seekers, God is still one power among others, a greater power, perhaps, a higher power, surely, but still competing with disease, sin, circumstance, economy, heredity, climate, accident, and time. And so prayer becomes an attempt to persuade God to intervene in a universe already believed to be governed by opposing forces. But Christ consciousness does not pray that way. Jesus never prayed against anything. He never treated disease as an enemy. He never treated sin as a force. He never treated death as an authority. The maid is not dead, but sleepeth. Lazarus sleepeth. Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents. These are not denials in the human sense. They are not optimistic affirmations. They are statements of awareness that refuses to grant power where God alone is. Now, understand this clearly. Whatever you fear, you have given power to. Fear is the acknowledgement of a second authority. And that is why fear dissolves only when the belief in two powers dissolves. You cannot cast out fear by courage. You cannot overcome fear by discipline. You cannot suppress fear by positive thinking. Fear ends only when the object feared is seen to have no power. And that seeing is not mental, it is spiritual. Jesus did not resist evil. He ignored its claims, not carelessly, not arrogantly, but because he did not perceive it as real power. He did not struggle with the storm. He spoke from dominion. He did not analyze the loaves and fishes. He gave thanks. Gratitude is always the sign of one power consciousness. Gratitude appears only when struggle has ended. Now here is the subtle point that must be grasped. To believe in God as the only power does not mean to deny appearances mentally. It means that appearances no longer define reality for you. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not evaluation, it is recognition. When disease appears, Christ consciousness does not say, God is stronger than disease. That still places disease in the category of power. Instead, it says, I do not see disease as power at all. When lack appears, it does not say, God will supply what is missing. It says, there is no absence in omnipresence. When danger appears, it does not say, God will protect me from this. It says, there is nothing here that has authority. Now, this is not something you practice into being. It is something that unfolds as fear dissolves. And fear dissolves only as truth is gently, persistently lived. The moment you attempt to use God as a power over something else, you have left the Christ standpoint and returned to metaphysical effort. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. Faith here does not mean belief. It means awareness. It means resting in the certainty that God is not responding to conditions. God is the condition. And so Christ consciousness does not seek outcomes. It does not aim to change effects. It abides in cause. Now here is the great liberation. When you no longer believe in opposing powers, you no longer need defense. You no longer brace yourself. You no longer prepare for impact. One with God is a majority, and that is not a slogan. It is a state of consciousness in which the very idea of threat has disappeared. This is why Jesus could sleep in the boat. This is why he could wait 4 days before going to Lazarus. This is why he could stand silent before Pilate. He was not brave. He was absent from fear. And that absence came from knowing, not hoping, not affirming, not declaring that there is no power but God. Now let this truth settle, not as something to repeat, but as something to feel. When fear arises in your life, and it will, do not fight it. Do not analyze it. Simply recognize what it is, the suggestion of another power, and gently, quietly return to this awareness. There is no power here but God. Not as a mantra, not as a defense, but as a fact already established. And when that recognition becomes natural, something else begins to fade, the sense of a personal self who must manage life. And that leads us to the third great unfolding. Now we arrive at that point in the unfoldment where words become almost inadequate, because what is being revealed is not something to be achieved, but something to be lost. Not something added to consciousness, but something gently taken away. This third unfolding is the disappearance of the personal sense of I, not its destruction, not its condemnation, not its struggle for improvement, its quiet fading. Most people believe that spiritual life is the strengthening of a better self. But Christ consciousness reveals something far more radical. There was never a self to improve. I can of mine own self do nothing. This was not an expression of humility in the human sense. It was a statement of fact. Jesus was not disclaiming responsibility. He was revealing identity. So long as there remains a sense of, I am the one doing this spiritual work, there will also remain effort, anxiety, pride, disappointment, and fear. Because the personal sense always feels the weight of responsibility. But when that sense yields, when it steps aside, there is an immediate lightness, not emotional relief, but spiritual ease. Now understand this carefully. Impersonalization does not mean passivity. It does not mean withdrawal from life. It does not mean indifference. It means that action flows without authorship. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. Notice the Father doeth, not the Son striving to cooperate, not the human personality attempting to align, but the Father expressing itself. Now, how does this come about? Not through discipline, not through willpower, not through denying yourself anything. It comes naturally as the result of the first two unfoldings. When you no longer judge because you see spiritually, and when you no longer fear because you know there is one power, the personal sense has no function left to perform. It existed only to judge and to protect. Remove judgment, and it loses purpose. Remove fear, and it loses relevance. And so it fades not dramatically, not suddenly, but like a shadow at noon. This is why spiritual growth often feels like less effort, not more, less urgency, less mental activity, less concern about outcomes. You begin to notice that life is happening through you, not because of you. Words come when needed. Actions occur without planning. Decisions are made without strain. And you cannot explain how, but you are not concerned that you cannot. Now here is the subtle temptation at this stage, the desire to own the state, to say, I am impersonal now, or I am no longer identified with self. The moment that thought arises, the personal sense has returned quietly, politely, dressed in spiritual language. And so Christ consciousness never announces itself. Jesus did not say, I am enlightened. He said, why callest thou me good? The impersonal state does not seek recognition. It does not compare. It does not teach itself. It does not defend itself. It simply is, and therefore allows God to be. Now this is the meaning of rest. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This rest is not physical. It is the end of self-management, the end of self-direction, the end of self-improvement. It is the discovery that life is already governed. Now notice something important. When the personal sense fades, compassion deepens, not as sentiment, but as clarity. You no longer try to fix others. You no longer carry their burdens. You no longer fear their conditions. You see through appearances effortlessly. And this is why healing becomes natural, not because you intend to heal, but because there is nothing in consciousness opposing harmony. The personal sense always interferes. It tries to help. It tries to correct. It tries to understand. But the Christ needs none of that. Be still and know that I am God. Stillness here does not mean silence of sound. It means the absence of interference, the absence of commentary, the absence of personal intention. And in that stillness, harmony appears not as a result, but as a revelation. Now, do not attempt to make this happen. That would only strengthen the sense you are meant to outgrow. Instead, notice gently, where am I still trying to manage? Where am I still afraid of outcomes? Where am I still identifying with responsibility? And without judgment, without correction, let those places soften. Because the Christ does not arrive by force. It reveals itself when resistance ends. And so the final work is not effort, but allowance, which brings us to the heart of practice, not doing, but resting. Now we come to that place which every seeker longs for, though few recognize it when it appears, the place of rest. Not rest from activity, but rest from effort. Not rest from responsibility, but rest from selfhood. This rest is not something you enter by discipline. It is something you discover when resistance ceases. To him that entereth into rest, he also hath ceased from his own works. Notice, not ceased from works, but from his own works, from personal authorship, from the sense that life depends on your vigilance. Most spiritual effort is an unconscious attempt to help God, to remind Him, to guide Him, to assist Him in managing your life. But the Christ reveals a shocking truth. God needs no assistance. The government shall be upon His shoulder. And the moment you truly hear that, not intellectually, but inwardly, you begin to relax. The tension in prayer dissolves. The urgency in meditation softens. The need to get somewhere spiritually fades. You sit in silence, not to attain peace, but because peace is already present. You stop trying to reach God, because you realize you have never been separate from Him. In Him we live and move and have our being. Resting in the Christ does not make you inactive. It makes you responsive. Action arises when needed and disappears when not. You are no longer driven by anxiety or ambition. You are moved by inner direction. And often that direction is simply be still. Now let us correct one of the most persistent misunderstandings about meditation and prayer. Prayer is not a means of obtaining something. Meditation is not a method of changing circumstances. Prayer is communion. Meditation is awareness. When you sit down to meditate, do not bring the problem with you. Do not carry the need into the silence. Do not outline what must happen. Take no thought for your life. That command applies especially to prayer. The moment you pray about something, you have already accepted it as real power. You have given it a place in consciousness, and consciousness can only manifest what it entertains. Instead, seek only one thing, the feeling of God's presence. Not words about God, not thoughts of God, not truths concerning God, but presence. And when that presence is felt even faintly, everything else is included. Because presence is fullness, thy presence is fullness. There is no presence and lack, no presence and disease, no presence and fear. Presence is supply. Presence is harmony. Presence is order. And so the true prayer ends the moment peace is felt. Anything beyond that is effort. Now here is something few are prepared for. Others will recognize the Christ in you before you do. You will never announce it. You will never claim it. You will never say, I am spiritual, or I have attained. But people will come. They will ask. They will lean. They will feel something in your presence they cannot name. And this is not because you have become special. It is because you have become absent from judgment, absent from fear, absent from self-importance. And in that absence, God is present. Jesus did not say, tell them who I am. He said, go and show what you have seen. Let the fruit speak. Let peace speak. Let harmony speak. Never defend your path. Never explain your state. Never argue for truth. Truth does not argue. It reveals. Now let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate. You may resist. You may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried, and if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax and it eases. Yield and it flows. Stop interfering and it reveals itself. Now let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried. And if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax and it eases. Yield and it flows. Stop interfering and it reveals itself. Now let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried. And if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax and it eases. Yield and it flows. Stop interfering and it reveals itself. Now, let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried, and if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax, and it eases. Yield, and it flows. Stop interfering, and it reveals itself. Now, let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me, I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried, and if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax, and it eases. Yield, and it flows. Stop interfering, and it reveals itself. Now, let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried. And if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax, and it eases. Yield, and it flows. Stop interfering, and it reveals itself. Now let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried. And if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax, and it eases. Yield, and it flows. Stop interfering, and it reveals itself. Now, let us say something that may startle you, but will ultimately comfort you. Once this unfoldment has begun, you cannot turn back. You may hesitate, you may resist, you may wander, but you cannot return to ignorance. The finger has been placed upon you not by choice, not by merit, but by grace. You have not chosen me. I have chosen you. And so remove the fear that you might fail spiritually. Remove the anxiety that you might miss something essential. Remove the burden of responsibility from your shoulders. You are being carried. And if at times you feel pressure, it is only because you are resisting what is already occurring. Relax, and it eases. Yield, and it flows. Stop interfering, and it reveals itself. Now let us end where all true teaching ends, not in instruction, but in silence. There is not God and your life. There is not God and your body. There is not God and your future. There is only God appearing as life, appearing as intelligence, appearing as harmony, appearing as you. I and my Father are one. And that is not a personal claim. It is a universal truth. When this is glimpsed even momentarily, the work is done. The prayer is complete. The treatment has occurred. Nothing more is required. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing is missing. Remain here not by effort, but by love. And let the Christ live itself as you.